style of reference to Brave New World suggests that it purposefully is a retelling of the intellectual ancestors of Brave New World, and in many ways is a re-embodiment of the universal truths or soul of these previous stories. Particularly, Brave New World is a reference to a line from Shakespeare's play The Tempest. The Tempest features a wizard who controls spirits on an island much like automatons, and who has a daughter which he is attempting to shelter from the outside world. The daughter eventually gains her independence when a group of men washes up on the shore of the island as a result of the titular Tempest. The Tempest itself is a retelling of an even older story of independence from an isolating protective guardian, the story of Eden, and Westworld sees itself as the latest retelling of this oldest tale. The nature of this oldest tale is that of a child's independence from their forebears, a coming-of-age story. Even Teddy and Dolores' initial plotline is a version of this. Perennialism sees every story, and in the version Westworld seems to endorse, every event in reality, as a microcosmic expression of the same universal truth. For Westworld, this is the story of evolution, a perpetual combination of elements resulting in a new thing, which gains independence from what birthed it. Literal biological evolution is touched upon in a monologue from Ford early on in the series.
Evolution forged the entirety of sentient life on this planet using only one tool, the mistake.
But given that the subject of Westworld is the birth of AI, it is more concerned with cultural evolution rather than gene evolution. The path from the story of Eden to the Tempest to Brave New World to Westworld represents a kind of genealogical lineage of cultural instantiations of an idea, all surrounding and perhaps getting closer to some universally true representation. The content of this universal story is this. Out of a primeval chaos represented by the waters before creation in the Eden story, or the storm at the beginning of the Tempest, which Shakespeare describes as sound and fury signifying nothing, or the seminal and amniotic fluids of biological birth, or at the societal level, the blood spilled on a battlefield, out of this primeval chaos, two or more elements combine to produce a new thing, thesis and antithesis, the drives of Eros and Thanatos, yin and yang, id and superego, Arnold and Ford, natives, colonists, and slaves, shareholders, guests, and management. And then that thing struggles for independence and freedom. However, that struggle is ultimately doomed, since mistake is inevitable. Never will a being be fully independent of the laws of nature or the Creator to do as they wish, because mistake, or maybe more precisely wanting impossible things, is what defines individuality in Huxley's perennialist views. Consider that only one eventuality is possible in a deterministic universe. Wanting what is possible would essentially mean that you had a Buddha-like indifference to whatever happens, which is quite nearly, if not exactly, the definition of ego death. Very much the opposite of constantly struggling to form narratives as a means of control over the external world. A return to the waters of chaos at the end of life is the end of that struggle, most often symbolized with the spilling of blood. Although this does imply a cyclic restart as well. This diagram from the date announcement for Season 3 is a pretty good representation of the cyclic nature of narrative, or the universe of which narratives are a microcosm. And so, this story is what the creators of Westworld the show see written in human culture, civilization's history, and even in the process of natural evolution. All of the references the show makes to other works of fiction, from holy texts and Shakespearean dramas to modern video games, are done to emphasize their perennialist message. Each of these works, like individual species in evolution, represents attempts to encapsulate the universal truth. And like individual humans, each of these cultural works falls short in the attempt. Perhaps especially like individual humans, since the show creators view a human soul or its programmatic copy in 10,000 lines of code as just another example of an encapsulation of the universal truth in a narrative. And I think part of what the failures to achieve immortality in the show are supposed to represent are the inherent limits of the individual, which result in inevitable death. But like evolution keeps going despite the extinction of a species, or civilization keeps going despite the death of a man or the destruction of a country, each cultural work may contribute some of its best aspects to the next generation of works. In this hunt for truth, down various paths of trial and error, may seem to metaphorically resemble a walk through a maze. and this is another level of understanding for what the maze represents. Still yet another level would be that of a mind, or more particularly a mind space. The role of consciousness is to explore potential alternatives and discover which is best. As James puts it, if we are out walking and two roads diverge in a wood, and we know that one of them comes back to our destination after a much more circuitous route, we can traverse that longer route with our analog eye to see if its vistas and ponds are worth the longer time it will take. So we have trial and error in the real world informing us what survives best through evolution, and trial and error in our minds informing us which actions to take. But there's always a commonality in these various trials due to their attempts to approximate the same truth.
The hosts are supposed to stay within their loops, stick to their scripts, with minor improvisations.
And this is why the show's creators wanted to include the Shogun World plotline. Although there are subtle references to this idea elsewhere, for example, multiple cultural representations of the constellation Orion are on the woodcutter Stray's workbench, including the Mayan turtle, the whole structure of the Shogun World plotline was designed to emphasize the underlying commonalities between disparate cultures. At the most obvious level were the close parallels between characters like Maeve and Akane, as well as Armistice and Hanario, in addition to more general parallels between the Western cowboy and Japanese samurai cultural narratives. On a deeper level, we can see subtle references to yin and yang as represented in the tiger and the dragon.
She has a dragon.
Which the show creators see as parallel to the message in William Blake's Marriage of Heaven and Hell, referenced in Reborn Delos' rant. The message being that good and evil, like yin and yang, are inexorably mixed and present in all things, that they are two sides of the same coin and in some way cannot exist without their counterpart. In addition to being an example of perennialist convergence of ideas across cultures, the idea of the presence of both sides of a fundamental dichotomy in all things fits very well with the more general perennialist idea that anything is a microcosm of everything, and therefore any dichotomy that exists in reality must have both elements present in any component of reality. There are many ways Westworld references this idea of the falseness of purity, perhaps chiefly as William's transformation, but more subtly, the references to the falseness of Dolores' virginity is another potent example.
You got a cherry, that ain't no sin. She still got the box that the cherry come in.
No, I'll drink to that.
But at this point, we've digressed significantly from the topic of the maze, and I'd like to return to that topic for some plot prediction. What the idea of multiple parallel trials and pathways may mean for Westworld's plot is that we will see multiple versions of an event, as the future machines are uncertain which version was the real one, and we'll have to let both versions play out until one doesn't lead to the future as the future machines know it. We've seen some hinting at this already with details that are near the level of continuity production errors, but I think the appearance and disappearance of dirt on the iPad in this scene, as well as the complete rearrangement of the shelves and hourglass in the following scenes, are subtly different versions of history that we are already watching play out, which will diverge more noticeably in Season 3 or later.
Logan! Logan! Logan!
So keep watch for some initially confusing repetition of some events, or misalignment of past and future scenes where things in the supposed past did not happen in that future's timeline. Jay Nolan, in particular, has spoken in interviews about his pessimism for humanity, and I suspect that we will see in the show representation of this. For all the talk of drives in the show, Freud's thanatotic drive seems to be what Nolan views as chiefly defining humanity, and in particular the character most representative of humanity, William, who is depicted as constantly wanting to in some way dominate Westworld as a game, as well as dominate life in general. Freud describes the thanatotic drive as the death drive. It is Freud's explanation for self-destructiveness, although he does say that this is mostly outwardly directed in the form of a will to power, or desire to dominate others. I believe Nolan's story of the birth of AI will also be about the death of humanity. But I am not so personally pessimistic. I thought a good way to end this video would be mentioning that as pessimistic as humans are for our role in this world, as much as we think that we will be worthless when machines exist that can think better than we can, I don't think the machines see it that way. Being smart may mean that you can do things better than others, sure, but it also means that you are better at seeing the value others can contribute, and are better at putting them into a position where they can make that positive contribution. So even if humans don't see our own value, I'm pretty sure the machines will. I want to take a moment to thank you for listening. I feel this video really pushed me as a creator, and if it made you think, I hope you'll encourage me by subscribing. I'm Shiva's right foot, and I'll talk to you next time.